Welcome to Business Math Basics Working with Percentages. In this lesson, we'll talk about how to work with percentages, which are essential when you're working in business. Remember, you can find additional videos and resources at my website, luthermaddy.com. A good place to start is by determining what is a percentage. Well, percent simply means part of 100. So a percentage can easily be converted to a decimal number for doing math by moving the decimal places 2 places to the left, or in the hundreds place. So for example, 5% is 5 parts of 100, and we write that out as 0.05. And here we can see with a chart that represents 5% is just a very small portion of the whole. We typically represent percentages when we write them out using the percent sign. However, mathematically that does not work too well. To use percentages in computations, we're going to have to convert them to their decimal equivalents, and we'll see how to do that coming up here. However, I do need to specify that some spreadsheets and calculators allow you to use the percent sign, but we're going to assume that's not the case. Right, as I already mentioned, in order to use percentages in math, we need to convert them to their decimal equivalent. So there's two steps to do that. Step number one is to drop the percent sign, and step number two is to divide the percent by 100. We'll go ahead and step through that with 7.5%. All right, to convert 7.5% into the decimal equivalent, we drop the percent, we end up with 7.5, we divide that by 100, and we end up with 0.075. There's also a shortcut for doing that. We could take 7.5 and we simply move the decimal point 2 places to the left. And we end up again with 0.075. Here's some other examples of percentages that we've converted to decimal points. 6.35% becomes 0.0635, 48% becomes 0.48, 8% becomes 0.08, and 100% becomes 1.0. Remember, very simply, we just move the decimal place 2 places to the left. All right, just one more example. When you're counting the change in your pocket, you're using cents. Now, cents means percent. So for example, a penny is 1 cent, or 1% of a dollar, 0.01. 25 cents or a quarter is 25% of a dollar. So we use percents almost everywhere. Within the business setting, you will run into percentages quite often. Some of those places will include working with interest rates, working with computing discounts, working with computing and figuring out retail markups, and of course the thing we all love to pay so much, taxes. And since we see percentages so often in business, let's go ahead and go a little further and figure out ways to add and subtract and multiply and even determine percentages. All right, first, let's start by trying to find the percentage of a specific value. So let's assume that a specific retail store is offering a 15% discount to all customers who use their app. So we're interested in a pair of pants, and that pair of pants normally sells for $85. We want to determine how large is that 15% discount. In other words, how much are we going to be saving if we use their app? Well, finding the amount of our 15% discount is actually a two-step process. Step number one, we're going to convert the percentage into a decimal. We already know how to do that. We simply divide it by 100 or move the decimal places 2 places to the left. So we end up with 15% equals 0.15. Then we multiply the original price by the percentage, now converted to a decimal. So 85 times 0.15 gives us a value of 12.75. So our discount off the $85 is $12.75. That's definitely worth using the app. Well, our next computation is similar to what we just did, but in this case, rather than knowing just how much the discount was, we want to know what the final cost will be. So in this case, let's assume that we're interested in buying a headset, and the headset normally costs $125, and the store is having a 15% off sale. We don't even have to use the app this time, so we want to know how much the headset is actually going to cost. Well, when you see this formula, you're probably thinking, duh. Again, all we're doing here is we're computing the discount. 15% off of $125 is 18.75, and we're subtracting that from 125. So our final cost, 125 minus 18.75, is 106.25. Now, again, all we did was just simply subtract the discount from the price. We're going to learn a faster way to do that, but for now, we'll go ahead and stay with this method. All right, one more example just to make sure we understand this very simple concept of subtracting a percentage from a value. So let's assume your total paycheck of what you earned was $1,200, but the government takes out 37% in taxes. So how much of the paycheck is actually going to be yours? Well, the first step is to compute the amount in taxes, which is 1200 times 0.37 or $444. So we subtract $444 from the 1200, leaving you with a grand total of $756 after the IRS has gotten their portion. Well, I told you there was going to be an easier way, and now that we've done it the hard way, let's look at an easier way. So let's assume a business offers a 5% discount if you pay cash. The item you want to buy is $90, so how much are you paying in total? Well, rather than computing the discount and then subtracting the discount from the amount, you can simply multiply 1 minus the discount with the price and end up with what you're actually going to be paying. So in this case, 5% discount would be 90 times 1 minus 0.05 or 90 times 0.95, which often you could do in your head. We end up then with $85.50, a very quick and easy way to subtract a percentage from a total price. Sometimes we need to add a percentage to a value. Examples of this might include sales tax, which is added to the cost of the purchase, surcharges, and even tips. So in this case, we're not interested in subtracting a percentage from a value, we're interested in adding it. So we want the cost plus the added percentage. All right, let's step through an example of adding a percentage to a value. So we purchase a $125 headset. There was no discount this time. And the sales tax that the state adds is 6.87. So how much are we going to be paying in total? Well, there's two steps to doing this. Step number one is to compute the added percentage, which is the sales tax. So we take 125 times 0.0687. Remember, we've converted the 6.87% into a decimal. We end up with a rounded amount of $8.59. Number two, we add that sales tax to the original amount. We end up with $125 plus $8.59. So our total out the door price is $133.59. Here's another approach for doing the same thing. It's a little bit of a shortcut. So rather than having to find the amount and then adding it to the amount, we can actually multiply the original amount by 1 plus the percentage. So 6% would be, for adding it, 106% of the original price. So if we take 125 times 1.06, we end up with 132.50. And I use just a rounded 6% instead of 6.87 just to give us an easy number. So just like we could subtract a percentage by multiplying the amount by 1 minus the percentage, we can add a percentage by taking the amount times 1 plus the percentage. All right, let's try another example of adding a percentage to a value so it makes sense here for sure. So assuming you're having lunch with a group of friends and your lunch, what you ordered, comes to $23.38. Now because there's a group of you, the restaurant automatically added a 23% surcharge or a tip. So you want to know how much your bill is going to be in total. Well, using the method we just talked about here, 23% added will be 100 plus 23%, or 123%, or 1.23. So the actual price then will be 23.88 times 1.23. So the cost of your lunch, including the surcharge, is $28.74. There are lots of reasons why you might want to determine an exact percentage, and one of the most common examples would be splitting a bill at the restaurant. So let's assume in this case you're having lunch with a group of people, and the restaurant bill came to $86. Well, you threw in $30 to pay for the meal. So you want to know what percent of the entire check did you pay for. In other words, 30 is what percent of 86? Well, here's the math. It's very, very simple. You just simply take 30 and divide it by 86. You end up with 0.3488, or 35% of the bill. Well, so of that $86, you paid 35% of it. Now, did you pay enough? Well, that depends on how many people were there. If there were 5 people there, then you probably should have paid a little bit less. On the other hand, if there were only 2, then you got a great deal because you didn't even pay your half. Another way we use percentages in business is determining the markup percentage. Now, of course, it makes perfect sense that a business cannot sell something for the same amount it paid for it. It has to make money to pay the rent, pay the employees, and make a little bit of profit. So there's two different ways to figure out the markup percentage. We can do it from the cost, and we can also do it from the selling price. So let's work through an example. So let's assume that you buy something for $40 in your business and you sell it for 60. So we want to know what is the markup percentage that you're working with. As I just said, we have to determine whether you're going to base that markup on the selling price or what it costs you. Our first computation will be based on cost. So to figure out the markup percentage based on cost, we first take the selling price, the price that we're selling it for. We subtract the cost. So in this case, we're selling it for 60, it cost us 40, and so our markup amount is $20. So then we divide the markup by the cost. 20 divided by 40.5. So in this case, the markup based on the cost is 50%. So we would say we have a 50% markup based on cost. So now with the same numbers, let's figure out what the markup percentage is based on the selling price. So the cost is $40 and the selling price is 60. Once again, the markup is 20, but this time we divide the 20 by 60 and we end up with a 33% markup. So which is better? Well, it just depends on what you choose as a business. Now, if I'm advertising to the public, I'm going to tell the public, hey, I only have a 33% markup. On the other hand, if I'm getting ready to sell my business, I'll tell the prospective owner, I have a 50% markup. And of course, if I'm selling to a prospective owner who is business savvy, he or she will definitely know the difference between selling price markup and cost markup. So what are some typical markups that you may encounter in different industries? Well, for example, candy typically has a markup based on cost of 100%. Jewelry is on average 250% markup based on cost. Furniture about 30% and fresh produce about 30% as well. Well, that concludes my lesson, Business Math Basics Working with Percentages. I hope you found it useful and enjoyed it. If so, please like it, potentially consider subscribing, and as I mentioned before, you can find additional resources, websites, and videos on my website, luthermaddy.com.